Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, today I want to make a video response, mostly to Davae, Breon, Jaxon, and his video he just posted on YouTube. I think today, narrative secret, GM as inner voice. And I had to write a bunch of notes here because there's some stuff I'm going to reference. And can you imagine the notes I would need to run a complex setting? No wonder I don't like them. Anyhow, instantly, first of all, he talked about this using the GM as kind of like an inner voice of the character, and using it for like things like info dumps or kind of as an alternative for saying things like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" When you know the player's about to do something particularly stupid, that sort of thing, or if they've missed something important. So anyhow, it may, first of all, I'm thinking, well, gosh, we've all done that. I've certainly done it a bunch of times. I probably even, talked about it. Certainly in the old videos on this channel, I talked about like sandbox campaigns, where I'm not going to change, aspects of the world just because the players, happen to stumble on there and they're not really prepared for that. I may, give them some subtle hints. Are you sure you want to do that? However, he proposed some alternate methods, and some stuff that I've already done, and I think a lot of us have already done. But it instantly made me think of some videos I'd watched recently by Runeslinger, and I'm smiling as I'm watching Davae's video. There's videos, I'll link it. One's called Description and Scene Framing in RPGs. Another one called, that's the one I first thought of. There's another one called Intrusive Description. Then there's one called Boundaries and Shared Zones of Control. And finally, a video response to same old G, not surprisingly, called Perception Checks, Forests and Trees. So let me start off. Once again, this is a friendly kind of like my take on this thing. And Davae did ask for some opinions and comments. So here's mine. And this is all just to generate discussion. So anyhow, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Clearly, like what my take on player agency is. And for me, when I'm talking about player agency, that means that I, as a player, I control my character, and I control. What I mean by that is I control what they do, what they say, what they think, and what they feel. That's my locus of control, over my character. So that's mine. And then the game master, on the other hand, in the games I tend to prefer, well, they control the rest of the world. They get to narrate the outcomes, of die rolls or whatever, that sort of thing. Anyhow, so like there's some boundaries, for me, and I kind of it's kind of thing almost like sometimes we misjudge as game masters and as players where those boundaries are. There's kind of like a DMZ, for lack of a better word, and sometimes my definition of where the boundary is and yours might be a little bit different. So Davae talked about he eschewed the idea of saying, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And instead of using this inner voice of the player. And he did say, to his credit, I mean, a lot of it was, it was good video. But he did mention right off the bat, it can be very dangerous. This is something that can be easily misused and it can be easily overdone. To me, I don't disagree entirely with the concept, but it's all on how you say it and how you frame it. Probably the one of the examples, he gave several different examples where you might use this. The first one is like, where the player has forgotten or not considered something that their character manifestly would know. And so, in the idea that you're reminding them what their character knows, or should know, and you're giving them facts. And here, like for me, I don't have a problem with that. And he gave the example of like, he's using a lot of D&D examples, but a person that's a ranger and probably knows the area that they're going to go into, and the player stated his intention that he wants to go a particular way, and the game master can remind them, it's all in how you say it to me. Remind them that, the ranger would know that this particular place might be unsafe, just in terms of unsafe to travel. And the ranger also might, have some experience in that area. Maybe something that hasn't really been revealed to the player yet, but maybe the ranger is from that area, and you say, well, you remember there are some trolls, or there tends to be some trolls that hang around this particular area. Now, to me, if you're giving facts and you're kind of reminding the player, or maybe even doing a little info dump of something their character knows that they just don't know yet, and just stating the facts, just the facts, ma'am, as they would say in Dragnet. To me, that's cool, because perhaps this player just hasn't considered that. Maybe they've forgotten something their character would manifestly know, just due to their profession or what have you. That's one thing. But when you start talking about you think this, or you feel like the best idea would be to go this other direction, or your intuition is telling you this isn't a good idea, when you're giving any kind of value judgment, or then I think you're overstepping that boundary as a game master. As a player, I don't want to have that boundary overstepped. I don't want you telling me what I think, what I feel. If you're reminding me of facts that I might have, not considered, that's one thing. But if you're telling me something that's manifestly a bad idea, then you're making a value judgment rather than giving me facts. And if I'm a game master, it's the same thing. The one thing I'm kind of on the fence about is he talked about divine messages, and I played in a game recently. I think it was the game we played with JDRD30. We played Fudge, Apodic, and the party cleric, for lack of a better word, did some kind of augury and asked his god, about the mission, the thing we were going to do, and the god specifically told him, bad idea, and so we had to drag him kicking and screaming to go do this. So I can see if you're actually imploring your god what should happen, and the idea, Davae gave this idea of maybe having the party priest, cleric, whatever you want to call it, get some kind of message, like a 2-word message, like mountain peaks, and his idea was that the cleric would then know the mountain pass was not a good idea. I don't see anything wrong necessarily with kind of throwing that in there, just those 2 words. But what the player then thinks of it, let them figure it out. They're a priest, for crying out loud. You figure out what your god said, because otherwise, I think you're intruding upon player agency, and you're messing with that boundary in the DMZ. So let me go on and read some more notes here, but. The whole idea of info dumps, he did give some great examples. He was talking about this campaign where he made this great statement. He said nobody's going to read your big giant document on your setting and all the things that are important. You know what the players know. You see why I don't like these complex settings, but it made me smile and laugh because I've certainly been there, on both sides of the screen. But he did say there's some good ways. He gave some great examples of how to give info dumps, but there's a certain part. Well, let me continue. He's talking about this Agnathi, I think was the word he used. Doesn't really matter, but it's this river clan. And so he gave the example of the party wizard. You're all in a cave, and there's some scrawl or some things carved into the cave wall. And he said, well, you can have this wizard see them, and instantly know, you recognize this is sort of shamanic language, and you remember, you've learned, in wizard school or whatever that this is the Agnathi shaman. Magical, writing or whatever like that. He also talked about the idea that maybe the party warrior fighter is fighting somebody, and he said, yeah, this fighting, you've never seen anybody actually use this style, but you do remember in your training, your mentor telling you about being taught this one fighting style by the Agnathi warrior of the Agnathi River clan. That idea, that I think is kind of cool. The kind of if you want to give your little setting info dumps that way. That's neat. But he did give him these examples a couple times, the idea that especially with a party wizard, the idea that you remember, getting this book from your instructor, and you read this book in the shores, the lake near the wizard's tower, about, at that point, I believe he's crossing the boundary, or I'd cross the boundaries as a GM if the game master is giving the player this big detailed history about their own history. I think that's crossing the boundary just as much as say being a player in a campaign, and all of a sudden you're in this town and you're not sure what's going on. You say, well, I jump on a horse, which they manifestly do not have. I ride into the woods, find a man tied to a tree, and then ask him what's going on because he has secrets about what's going on in this town. And Runeslinger will remember that, recognize that. As at that point, as a player, you're making up information, stuff about the world that, you're jumping into the game master's locus of control. You both misjudged where the boundary is. And I tell you what, I really wholeheartedly agreed with what Davae was talking about in terms of avoiding die rolls. He talked about the idea there's a door that's stuck, and there's somebody in the party that has fantastic strength, and he could describe, well, what's the door like? This is how stuck it looks, and then, well, you're pretty strong, and he says, well, you feel you should be able to open this, and that's kind of a gray area word, but I get the idea. I've certainly done this a bunch of times, and I think it's okay to if you're that character, you can kind of give a judgment and say, yeah, you're pretty sure you can open that. I think you're pretty sure. I think it's about how you use the language, and I'm splitting hairs here. Funny for a guy that doesn't have any, but you get the idea. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. I like avoiding die rolls. I like this whole idea of, I've talked about it before, that a person that has a particular skill or ability at a certain level, a lot of times you don't need to roll for it. That's how competent you are. So I'm down with that. It's just how you frame it. And the last thing, he didn't touch on this too much, but the idea that maybe the characters are missing something, they're flat out missing something, and that was very manifest in the video response Runeslinger made to Slame OG. I think it was like perception, forest and trees, where Samuel G. Talked about this idea that he had the party, I believe, like for 2 hours. The characters were in this pretty much ghost town, thinking they might be missing something. There might be something there, and apparently, if I'm getting it right, there's nothing there, And Samuel G. had just done his best to describe, what they saw, and they still weren't buying it. And so I could see in a situation like that, it'd be very tempting on both sides of the screen for the game master to just kind of give them to finally say, you feel or you realize there's nothing here, to move things along. Once again, I think you're kind of jumping into the, you're putting thought, you're telling them what they think and what they feel, as opposed to what they can see. And they, if they ask to look around more, okay, you tell them, okay, well, it appears to be deserted. You don't see anything here. There aren't any footprints. That sort of thing. I've certainly had it be tempting on the other side of the screen to want the game master to give me some information. I'll give you a little example recently where, the con I played at a month or two ago, I've talked about it. I played this In Nomine game, and the DM, this guy Brian, phenomenal DM, and just really involved in the hobby, goes to, Gary Con and Gen Con, stuff like that. People know who he is. Great guy. So I'm lucky to have him in the town. But we're playing this game, and we're in this town. We're supposed to figure out this, what's going on, pretty much. We're tracking down some drug dealer type thing, because devils are involved in that sort of thing, or demons. And so, so my character has pretty much decided she's going to go into a bar, because I guess she had some kind of history with that sort of stuff. She hung around the seedy area of the town, and so she's pretty much trying to interrogate people, find out what's going on, using all this kind of devious stuff. And Brian just sat there and let me do that. And so other characters, do whatever. And finally, one of the players, and we were getting a little bit frustrated. And one of the players said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to go to the newsstand and pick up a newspaper." And Brian smiled and says, "Yeah, well, it's on the front page. What's going on?" And so the game master was patient, and didn't play that kind of inner voice and intuition in my head, which would have been nice for the moment, but it was far more satisfying for somebody to figure it out, for one of the players to figure it out and say, "Oh yeah, my character is going to go there and go to the newsstand and get a newspaper." And son of a gun, we found out what was happening. So. So I'm not necessarily knocking Davae's video, or I think it's, like you said, it's dangerous. It's something that, for me, it's nuanced, and it's all in how you present this information. But to me, just like I'm not in favor of players declaring what's going on in the world, like horses and people tied to trees. At the same time, I'm firmly believe that my agency over my characters, over what they do, say, think, and feel. So, and that would include intuition. If you're stating just facts as a game master, that's one thing, and including the facts that maybe my character should know and I might have just forgotten in the moment, and that's a whole different subject as well. But I'll just leave it at that for now. But if you're giving me value statements, that's where I draw the line. That's where the boundary in the DMZ is. So what do you think? What's your opinion? What's your take on all this? Because once again, I'd like to generate discussion.